in the shadowed halls of Larchwood Manor, a single handkerchief embroidered with a crimson rose ignites, a deadly game of secrets. When flames erupt and a gunshot echoes, Hercule Poirot uncovers a chilling truth. A scorned lover's past fuels a vendetta, but a hidden hand weaves a web of deception. Who burned the rose, and who will fall next? The answer lies in a twisted betrayal that will shock you in just 30 seconds. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Larchwood Manor. The autumn wind swept through London streets with a restless energy, carrying the scent of damp leaves, chimney smoke, and the faint temps of the Thames. It was a brisk October morning in 1935, and Hercule Poirot stood at the threshold of his impeccably ordered flat in Whitehaven Mansions, adjusting the brim of his Homburg hat with a precision that bordered on reverence. His overcoat, tailored to perfection, hung about his slight frame, with the elegance of a man who considered neatness not merely a habit but a moral imperative. In his gloved hand he held a letter, its crisp envelope bearing the crest of Larchwood Manor. The missive, delivered by the morning post, had piqued his curiosity, rare and delightful sensation for a man whose little grey cells were seldom idle. The letter was from Lady Beatrice Ashford, a widow of considerable wealth and reputation, whose name evoked images of grand estates and whispered scandals. Her words were formal, yet tinged with an urgency that intrigued Poirot. She requested his presence at Larchwood Manor, her country residence in Sussex, for a weekend gathering. The purpose, she wrote, was to discuss a matter of delicate concern, though she offered no further details. Poirot, never one to resist a puzzle, had accepted at once, his mind already turning over the possibilities. Was it a theft, a family dispute, or something more sinister? The lack of specificity was, to him, as enticing as a blank canvas to an artist's dot. To add a touch of companionship to the venture, Poirot had persuaded his old friend, Captain Arthur Hastings, to join him. Hastings, ever the loyal sidekick, had leaped at the opportunity, his boyish enthusiasm undimmed by the years. As the train to Sussex rattled through the countryside, its windows streaked with mist, the two men sat in a first-class compartment, the clatter of wheels providing a rhythmic backdrop to their conversation. Hastings, his face animated, leaned forward, his hands clasped as if to contain his excitement. "I'll wager it's a family squabble," he declared, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who fancied himself a keen judge of human nature. "You know how these old families are, Poirot estates, inheritances, jealousies festering for generations. Mark my words, it's bound to be about money." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of amusement. "Perhaps, mon ami," he replied, his green eyes glinting with mischief. "But Lady Ashford's words, they suggest something more, particular. A matter of delicacy, she says. That is not the language of mere financial disputes. No, I suspect there is a thread here. A thread that is both personal and precise. We shall see what secrets Larchwood Manor holds." Hastings chuckled, undeterred. "You and your threads, Poirot. You'll be seeing clues in the wallpaper next." "Possibly," Poirot said, his tone serene. "The wallpaper, it can tell you much about the character of a house and its occupants." The train journey passed in a blur of golden fields and hedgerows, the Sussex landscape unfolding like a watercolor painting under a sky heavy with clouds. Poirot, ever observant, noted the details, the way the light caught the dew on the grass, the fleeting glimpse of a farmer leading a horse, the faint smudge of smoke rising from a distant chimney. These were not mere scenery to him, but fragments of a world that might, in time, yield answers. Hastings, meanwhile, busied himself with a newspaper, muttering about the latest cricket scores and the state of the government. As the train pulled into the small station of Larchwood Halt, a chauffeured car awaited them, its polished black exterior gleaming despite the overcast sky. The driver, a taciturn man with a face like weathered oak, introduced himself as Jarvis, the manor's butler, and ushered them into the vehicle. The drive to Larchwood Manor was brief but striking. The estate emerged from the mist like a vision from a Gothic novel, its grey stone walls rising sternly against a backdrop of ancient oaks. Ivy clung to the facade, softening its severity, while tall windows reflected the fading light like unblinking eyes. The manor exuded an air of permanence, as if it had stood for centuries and would stand for centuries more, indifferent to the fleeting dramas of its inhabitants. Jarvis led them, through a heavy oak door, into a hall of polished marble, where a grand staircase spiraled upward, its banister carved with intricate vines. The air was warm, scented with beeswax and lavender, and a fire crackled in a massive hearth. Lady Beatrice Ashford awaited them in the drawing-room, a space of understated opulence, with velvet drapes, mahogany furniture, and a chandelier cast soft prisms of light across the walls. She rose to greet them, a tall woman in her late 50s, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her grey eyes, sharp and assessing, lingered on Poirot as if measuring his worth. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and cultured, "I am most grateful you accepted my invitation. And Captain Hastings, a pleasure to meet you. I trust your journey was comfortable." "Most comfortable," Madame Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "Your hospitality is already evident, but I confess, your letteret has stirred my curiosity." "A matter of delicate concern," you said. "Might you enlighten us further?" Lady Beatrice's lips tightened, and she glanced at the other guests, who were beginning to gather. "In due time, Monsieur Poirot. For now, allow me to introduce my companions for the weekend." The guests were a small but varied assembly, each carrying an air of purpose that Poirot found intriguing. First was Charles Ashford, Lady Beatrice's nephew, a lanky young man in his early 30s with a restless energy. His dark hair was slightly dishevelled, and his eyes darted about the room as if seeking an escape. He shook Poirot's hand with a grip that was too firm, a sign, Poirot noted, of a man trying to assert confidence he did not feel. Next was Eleanor Vance, Lady Beatrice's stepdaughter from her late husband's first marriage. She was a striking woman, perhaps 25, with auburn hair and a porcelain complexion. Yet her beauty was marred by a sullen expression, her lips set in a line that suggested resentment. She offered a curt nod, her gaze sliding past Poirot to rest on the window, as if longing to be elsewhere. Dr. Malcolm Reid, a physician in his 40s, had a reserved demeanour that bordered on aloofness. His wire-rimmed spectacles and neatly trimmed beard gave him an air of scholarly detachment, but his hands, clasped tightly behind his back, betrayed a hint of unease. He murmured a polite greeting, his voice soft but precise. Miss Clara Henshaw, a spinster of indeterminate age, was introduced as a distant cousin of Lady Beatrice. Her sharp features and piercing blue eyes gave her the look of a hawk, and her conversation was laced with a dry wit that bordered on cruelty. She sized up Poirot with a single glance, as if cataloguing his every detail for later dissection. The final guest, Mr. Victor Langley, was a solicitor whose florid complexion and hearty laugh suggested a fondness for brandy and good company. His suit, though well cut, was slightly rumpled, and his tie was askew, hinting at a man who cared more for conviviality than convention. He clapped Hastings on the shoulder with a familiarity that made the captain wince. "Dinner will be served." Shortly, Lady Beatrice announced, her tone brisk. "Jarvis will show you to your rooms to freshen up." As Poirot and Hastings followed the butler upstairs, Poirot's mind was already at work. The guests, he sensed, were not here by chance. Each had a role to play, a piece in the puzzle Lady Beatrice had hinted at. The manor itself seemed to hum with secrets, its walls whispering of past promises and betrayals. Their rooms were adjacent, overlooking the estate's manicured gardens. Poirot's was furnished with a four-poster bed, a writing desk, and a fireplace that cast a warm glow. He unpacked his valise with care, arranging his toiletries with the precision of a surgeon. Hastings, in contrast, tossed his suitcase onto the bed and promptly sprawled in an armchair, his legs stretched out. "Well, Poirot," he said, "what do you make of this lot? A nervous nephew, a sulky stepdaughter, a dear doctor, a sharp-tongued spinster, and a solicitor who's had one too many. Sounds like a recipe for trouble." Poirot smiled, polishing his cufflinks with a silk handkerchief. "You are not wrong, Hastings, but it is the recipe itself that interests me. Why these ingredients? Why now, Lady Beatrice? She is the key." Her letter was not a casual request. There is fear in her words, though she hides it well. "Fear," Hastings frowned. "She seemed perfectly composed to me. Oui, but the eyes, mon ami, they do not lie." Her eyes, they were watchful, like those of a deer in the forest. She expects danger, and she has called Hercule Poirot to prevent it. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have graced a palace. A long table, draped in white linen, gleamed with silver and crystal. The meal was exquisite. Consomme, roasted pheasant, and a delicate lemon soufflé, but the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tensions. Lady Beatrice presided at the head of the table, her posture regal but her fingers restless, clutching a small, embroidered handkerchief. Poirot noted its design, a crimson rose against a cream background, the stitches so fine they seemed almost painted. It was a curious object for such attention, and he filed the observation away. Charles spoke too quickly, his anecdotes about London life tinged with desperation, as if seeking approval. Eleanor ate in silence, her fork moving mechanically. Dr. Reid offered occasional remarks on medical advancements, his tone measured but distant. Miss Henshaw's comments were barbed, her eyes darting between her fellow guests as if probing for weaknesses. Mr. Langley, by contrast, was jovial, regaling the table with tales of legal triumphs that grew more improbable with each glass of wine. As the dessert plates were cleared, Lady Beatrice rose abruptly, her handkerchief slipping to the floor. She retrieved it with a trembling hand, her face pale. "Excuse me," she murmured. "I must attend to some correspondence in my study." The guests exchanged glances, the silence thick with curiosity. Poirot, ever alert, noted the flicker of unease in Charles's eyes, the tightening of Eleanor's jaw, the subtle shift in Dr. Reid's posture. Miss Henshaw's lips curved in a faint, knowing smile, while Langley merely reached for the decanter. Moments later, a scream shattered the quiet. It came from the direction of Lady Beatrice's study, high and sharp, cutting through the murmur of conversation. The guests leaped to their feet, chairs scraping against the polished floor. Poirot, with surprising agility, was the first to reach the corridor, Hastings close behind. Jarvis, pale but composed, led the way to the study, where the door stood ajar inside, Flames danced across the desk, licking at a pile of papers and threatening the heavy velvet curtains. Lady Beatrice stood frozen, her eyes wide with terror. Charles, quick to act, seized a pitcher of water from a side table and doused the fire, sending up a cloud of steam. The room fell silent, save for the hiss of embers and the ragged breathing of the guests. In the center of the desk, partially charred but unmistakable, lay the handkerchief, its crimson rose now blackened at the edges. Lady Beatrice stared at it, her hand pressed to her chest. "Someone meant to frighten me," she whispered. "Or worse." Poirot stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the room. The fire had been small, confined to the desk, and the air carried the faint scent of lamp oil. He knelt beside the handkerchief, careful not to touch it. The fabric was damp with oil, the burn marks deliberate. This was no accident, he concluded, but a calculated act. The handkerchief was not merely a casualty, it was the target, Madame Poirot said, rising. "This handkerchief, it is of significance to you, is it not?" Lady Beatrice nodded, her voice barely audible. "It was a gift from my late husband, Sir Henry. I carry it always." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet someone chose to destroy it all, to make you believe they would. Why?" She shook her head, her composure fraying. "I don't know, but I am afraid, Monsieur Poirot. I am very afraid." Hastings, standing by the door, muttered, "Could be a servant with a grudge. These big houses always have someone disgruntled." Poirot shook his head, his expression grave. "Nan, Hastings, this is not the work of a servant. This is personal. The handkerchief fit is a message, a warning, and Hercule Poirot will uncover its meaning." The guests dispersed, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion. Lady Beatrice retired to her room, escorted by Jarvis, while Poirot lingered in the study, his mind racing. The fire, the handkerchief, the scream, they were pieces of a puzzle, each carefully placed. But by whom, and to what end? As he and Hastings returned to their rooms, the manor seemed to close in around them, its shadows deeper, its silence heavier. Poirot paused at the window, gazing out at the moonlit gardens. "This weekend, mon ami," he said softly, "it will not be restful. There is a darkness here, and we must bring it to light." Hastings nodded, his earlier levity gone. "I don't like it, Poirot. There's something rotten in this house." "Oui," Poirot replied, his voice a whisper, "and it begins with that handkerchief in the fire." The night stretched on, the manor creaking under the weight of its secrets. Poirot lay awake, his little grey cells humming, piecing together the fragments of the evening. Lady Beatrice, fear, the guest's unease, the handkerchief's significance, it was a tapestry of motives and misdirection, and somewhere, hidden in plain sight, was the truth. Chapter 2. The fire in the study. The morning after the fire dawned grey and heavy, the Sussex sky cloaked in clouds that mirrored the unease within Larchwood Manor. Hercule Poirot, ever punctual, rose early, his routine of dressing and grooming, a ritual as precise as a symphony. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his moustache was waxed to perfection, and his mind, those indefatigable little grey cells, was already turning over the events of the previous evening. The charred handkerchief, Lady Beatrice's pale face, the flicker of suspicion in the guest's eyes, these were not mere incidents, but threads in a tapestry of intrigue, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. Breakfast was served in the dining room, where the grandeur of the previous night's dinner seemed diminished by the morning light. The long table was set with crisp linens and silver, but the atmosphere was strained, the clink of china and murmur of voices punctuated by uneasy silences. Lady Beatrice presided with a forced composure, her grey eyes darting to the door as if expecting another calamity. The handkerchief, now safely retrieved from the study and placed in a velvet-lined box, was absent, but its presence lingered in the minds of all. Charles Ashford, the nervous nephew, picked at his eggs, his fork, scraping the plate with a sound that set Poirot's nerves on edge. Eleanor Vance, the sullen stepdaughter, sipped her tea in silence, her auburn hair catching the light, but her expression as cold as the porcelain cup in her hand. Dr. Malcolm Reid, the reserved physician, read a medical journal, his spectacles glinting as he turned the pages, though Poirot noted his eyes lingered too long on each line, as if distracted. Miss Clara Henshaw, the sharp-tongued spinster, buttered her toast with deliberate precision, her blue eyes scanning the room like a predator assessing its prey. Mr. Victor Langley, the solicitor, was the only one who seemed unaffected, his hearty laugh breaking the tension as he recounted a legal anecdote, though his bloodshot eyes suggested a night spent with the brandy decanter. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, leaned close and whispered, "A gloomy lot this morning, E.H. That fire's got them all on edge." Poirot nodded, his gaze fixed on Lady Beatrice. "Oui, mon ami, but it is not only the fire. It is the why of the fire. Why the handkerchief? Why the study? And why last night, with all of us present? There is intention here, Hastings, and intention reveals character." After breakfast, Poirot requested a private audience with Lady Beatrice, who led him to a small parlour overlooking the rose garden. The room was cosy, with chintz, curtains, and a fireplace that crackled softly, but the air was heavy with her apprehension. She sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, and Poirot noted the absence of the handkerchief she had clutched so fiercely the night before. "Madame," he began, his tone gentle but probing, "the fire last night, it was no accident, I think. The handkerchief, it was doused with lamp oil, placed deliberately to burn. You said it was a gift from your late husband, Sir Henry. Tell me, why is it so precious to you, and why might someone wish to destroy it?" Lady Beatrice's lips trembled, but her voice remained steady. "It was one of a pair, Monsieur Poirot, embroidered by my mother-in-law as a wedding gift. Henry gave it to me on our first anniversary, and I have carried it ever since his death. 5 years ago, it is a reminder of happier times." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing, and yet someone chose this object, so personal, so intimate, to send a message. "Have you enemies, madame? Someone who wishes you harm?" She hesitated, her gaze drifting to the window. "I am a wealthy woman, Monsieur Poirot. Wealth attracts envy, and envy breeds malice. But I cannot think of anyone who would stoop to such a petty act. Petty." Poirot's voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. "Nan, madame, this was not petty, it was precise. The fire did not spread beyond the desk. The handkerchief was not wholly destroyed. This was a warning, carefully staged, and I, Hercule Poirot, will discover its purpose." Leaving Lady Beatrice to her thoughts, Poirot returned to the study, where the acrid scent of smoke still lingered. The desk, a heavy mahogany piece, bore scorch marks, and the rug beneath was singed but intact. He examined the scene with meticulous care, noting the position of the lamp, its reservoir low but not empty, and the scattered papers, some blackened but legible. A letter opener, its silver handle gleaming, lay untouched, suggesting the fire had been contained deliberately. The handkerchief, now in Lady Beatrice's possession, had been the focal point. its crimson rose a stark contrast to the charred edges. Hastings joined him, his face flushed with excitement. "I've been talking to the servants, Poirot. The maids are all aflutter, but they swear no one was near the study before the fire. Jarvis, the butler, says he locked the lamp oil in the pantry days ago. If someone used it, they had to get it out first." Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing the desk's surface. "The oil, it is the key. It was not spilled by accident. Someone brought it here, applied it to the handkerchief, and set the flame. But why not let the fire spread? Why stop at a warning?" "Perhaps they were interrupted," Hastings suggested. "Someone heard Lady Beatrice's scream and came running." "Perhaps," Poirot said, but his tone was skeptical. "Or perhaps the fire was meant to be seen, to be discovered. A spectacle, Hastings, designed to provoke fear." The morning passed in quiet observation. Poirot moved among the guests, his questions gentle but relentless, his eyes missing nothing. Charles Ashford admitted to financial difficulties, his inheritance from Lady Beatrice, his only hope of clearing debts from a failed business venture in London. "I'd never hurt Aunt Beatrice," he insisted, his voice cracking. "She's been nothing but kind to me." Eleanor Vance, when pressed, spoke with barely concealed bitterness. "This house is a prison," she said, her green eyes flashing. "Beatrice controls everything, the estate, the money, my future. But I was in the drawing room when the fire started. Ask anyone." Dr. Reid claimed to have been in his room, reading a medical text on toxicology. His alibi was unverified, and Poirot noted the faint tremor in his hands as he spoke. Miss Henshaw, with her usual sharpness, declared she had been in the library, browsing a volume of poetry. "I've no interest in fires or handkerchiefs," she said, her smile thin. "But I dare say someone here does." Mr. Langley, bleary-eyed and jovial, claimed to have been in the billiard room, practicing shots. "Not much of an alibi, I suppose," he chuckled, "but I'm a dreadful shot with anything but a cue." Poirot's inquiries were interrupted by a summons to the drawing room, where Lady Beatrice awaited. She stood by the fireplace, her posture rigid, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I must tell you something. Last night, after the fire, I found this in my room." She produced a small, folded note, its paper plain but creased, as if handled roughly. The message, written in a hurried scrawl, "Reid, the rose will burn again." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "This, madame, is most significant. The rose, it refers to the handkerchief. Now, someone wishes you to know they are not finished." Lady Beatrice nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I fear for my safety, Monsieur Poirot. I fear for my life." Hastings, standing nearby, looked alarmed. "Good Lord, Poirot, this is getting serious. A fire's one thing, but a threat like this. We need to search the house, question the servants again." Poirot raised a hand, his expression calm but resolute. "Patience, mon ami. The note, it is another piece of the puzzle. The writer is bold, but also careless. They have left us a clue, their handwriting, their choice of words. We will find them." As the afternoon wore on, Poirot continued his observations, moving through the manor like a shadow, his presence both unobtrusive and inescapable. He noted the way Charles avoided his aunt's gaze, the way Eleanor's fingers tightened around her teacup when Dr. Reid entered the room, the way Miss Henshaw's eyes followed Langley's every move. Each gesture, each glance, was a brushstroke in the portrait of Larchwood Manor's secrets. By evening, the tension had thickened, the guests retiring early to their rooms. Poirot, however, remained in the drawing room, sipping a tisane prepared by Jarvis, Hastings, restless, paced before the fire. "What's our next move, Poirot? This place feels like a powder keg." Poirot smiled, his eyes distant. "We watch Hastings. We listen." The fire in the study was but the opening act. The handkerchief, the note they are signals, meant to unsettle. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily unsettled. Tomorrow we will tighten the net. As the manor settled into an uneasy silence, Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the mystery. The handkerchief, the fire, the note, they were not random acts but parts of a deliberate design. And somewhere, among the guests or the shadows of Larchwood Manor, lay the truth, waiting to be uncovered by the little grey cells. Chapter 3. The Guests Under Scrutiny, the second morning at Larchwood. Manor broke with a chill that seeped through the heavy drapes, as if the house itself were reluctant to warm to its occupants. Hercule Poirot, ever fastidious, had risen before dawn, his mind a hive of activity as he contemplated the events of the previous night, the fire, the threatening note, and the enigmatic handkerchief with its crimson rose. He stood at his window, gazing out at the mist-shrouded gardens, where dew glistened on the manicured hedges like tears on a mourner's cheek. The manor, with its ancient stones and watchful windows, seemed to guard its secrets jealously, but Poirot was undeterred. Secrets, he knew, were merely truths waiting to be coaxed into the light. Breakfast was a subdued affair, the clatter of cutlery muted by the weight of suspicion that hung over the table. Lady Beatrice, though composed, bore the pallor of a sleepless night, her hands folded tightly in her lap as if to anchor herself against unseen threats. The other guests were no less affected. Charles Ashford's eyes darted nervously, his fork hovering over untouched kippers. Eleanor Vance, her auburn hair pinned severely, stared into her coffee with a look that suggested she saw nothing but her own grievances. Dr. Malcolm Reid, his spectacles polished to a gleam, ate methodically, his movements precise but his gaze evasive. Miss Clara Henshaw, her sharp features accentuated by the morning light, sliced her grapefruit with a precision that bordered on menace. Only Mr. Victor Langley seemed untouched by the gloom, his laughter booming as he recounted a tale of a courtroom blunder, though Poirot noted the strain in his eyes, a crack in his jovial facade. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, leaned close, his voice low. "They're all jumpy as cats, Poirot. That note's got them rattled. Do you think it's one of them?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "One of them, mon ami, perhaps, or perhaps not. The note, the fire, they are acts of theatre, designed to provoke. But who is the audience? Lady Beatrice, certainement, but also, I think, all of us. We are players in a drama, and the script is not yet clear." After breakfast, Poirot requested permission to roam the manor freely, a request Lady Beatrice granted with a weary nod. He began his investigation in earnest, moving through the house with the quiet intensity of a bloodhound on the scent. His first stop was the study, where the fire had left its mark. The desk, though cleaned by the diligent Jarvis, still bore faint scorch marks, and the air carried a lingering trace of smoke. Poirot examined the lamp, its reservoir now refilled, and noted the absence of any stray oil stains on the floor. The precision of the act intrigued him. Whoever had set the fire had been careful, deliberate, ensuring the flames did not spread beyond their intended target. He turned his attention to the guests, beginning with Charles Ashford. Poirot found him in the conservatory, pacing among the ferns, his hands thrust deep into his pockets. The young man's face was drawn, his eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. Monsieur Ashford Poirot began, his tone courteous but firm. You are troubled, I think. The fire, the note, they weigh heavily on you. Tell me, what is your connection to this handkerchief, and why might someone wish to frighten your aunt? Charles stopped pacing, his shoulders sagging. I don't know anything about the handkerchief, Monsieur Poirot. It's just some old thing Aunt Beatrice carries about. As for enemies, well, she's rich, isn't she? People get ideas when there's money involved. He hesitated, then added, I've had some troubles myself, debts, you know, but I'd never hurt her. She's promised to help me, once the estate's settled. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Debts, you say, and this promise, it is your only hope. Charles flushed, his voice rising. Look, I know how it sounds, but I was in the dining room when the fire started. Everyone saw me. Everyone, perhaps, Poirot said softly, but the eyes, they can be deceived. Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual among the guests? A glance, a word, perhaps. Charles shook his head, but his hesitation spoke volumes. Eleanor, been odd lately, bitter, you know. She hates being under Aunt Beatrice's thumb, but that's all I'll say. Next, Poirot sought out Eleanor Vance, whom he found in the music room, seated at a grand piano but not playing. Her fingers rested on the keys, as if contemplating a melody she could not bring herself to play. Her green eyes, sharp with defiance, met Poirot's without warmth. Mademoiselle Vance, he said, bowing slightly, you are not at ease in this house. The fire, it has disturbed you, Nan. Or is it something deeper, something tied to Lady Beatrice? Eleanor's lips curled in a faint sneer. You're a clever one, aren't you? Yes, I'm not fond of Beatrice. She controls everything, my father's estate, my allowance, my life. But I didn't set that fire. I was with the others, drinking coffee and listening to Langley's tiresome stories. And the handkerchief, Poirot pressed. It means nothing to you. She shrugged, her expression guarded. It's her keepsake, from my father. She clings to it like a talisman. If someone burned it, they wanted to hurt her where it counts. Poirot noted the edge in her voice, the flicker of resentment. And you, mademoiselle, do you wish to hurt her? Eleanor's eyes flashed, but she said nothing, her silence more telling than words. Dr. Malcolm Reid was in the library, surrounded by shelves of leather-bound volumes. He stood by a window, a book in hand, though Poirot suspected he had not turned a page in some time. The physician's demeanor was calm, almost too calm, his hands steady but his jaw tight. Dr. Reid, Poirot said, his voice light, you are a man of science? You observe, you analyze. What do you make of this fire, this note? Reid adjusted his spectacles, his gaze steady. An act of malice, clearly. Someone with access to the study and the lamp oil. As for the note, it's a coward's way of threatening. I was in my room, reading, when the fire started. I know nothing more. Poirot smiled faintly. A man of your precision, he notices details. Have you seen anything out of place? A guest, perhaps, behaving strangely? Reid hesitated. Then, said Miss Henshaw was in the library earlier that evening, before dinner. She seemed preoccupied, but I wouldn't accuse her of anything. Miss Clara Henshaw was next, found in the rose garden, clipping dead blooms with a pair of shears. Her movements were brisk, her expression unyielding, as if the flowers were adversaries to be subdued. Poirot approached with caution, sensing her sharp wit could cut as deeply as her shears. "Miss Henshaw," he began, "you have a keen eye, I think. The fire, the note, what did they tell you about our little gathering?" Clara's lips twitched in a wry smile. "They tell me someone has a grudge, Monsieur Poirot. Beatrice isn't as beloved as she thinks. That handkerchief, it's a symbol, isn't it? Burn it, and you burn her past. As for me, I was in the library, reading Tennyson. A dull alibi, but true. And the other guests?" Poirot asked. "You observed them closely, Nan." Her eyes gleamed. "Oh, I watched them all. Charles is desperate, Eleanor's resentful. Reid's hiding something, and Langley drinks to forget. But I've no proof, only instincts." Finally, Poirot found Mr. Victor Langley in the billiard room, a glass of brandy in hand despite the early hour. His laughter was forced, his eyes red-rimmed, and Poirot sensed a man clinging to joviality as a shield. "Mr. Langley," Poirot said, "you are a solicitor, a man of documents and secrets. The fire, the note, do they suggest anything to you?" Langley chuckled, swirling his glass. "Suggests someone's got it in for Beatrice. She's got money, power people resent that. Me, I was potting balls when it happened. Not much of a story, I'm afraid." "And the handkerchief?" Poirot asked, his voice soft. Langley shrugged. "Some old relic. Means the world to her. Though, whoever burned it knew that." As the day wore on, Poirot retreated to the parlour, where he sipped a tisane, and reviewed his findings. Each guest had an alibi, flimsy or otherwise, but none were airtight. The fire, the note, the handkerchief, they formed a pattern, a message meant to unsettle. But why? Was it revenge, greed, or something deeper, rooted in the manor's past? Hastings, joining him, looked frustrated. "We're no closer, Poirot. Everyone's got a motive, but no one's got proof." "What's next?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Next, mon ami, we dig deeper. The handkerchief, it is the heart of this mystery. Meaning its history, they will lead us to the truth. And Hercule Poirot never fails to find the truth." The manor settled into an uneasy quiet, the guests retreating to their corners, each nursing their own thoughts. Poirot, however, felt the pulse of the mystery quickening. The fire was only the beginning, and the next act, he sensed, was not far off. Chapter 4. A second warning. The afternoon sun pierced the clouds over Larchwood Manor, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns as the guests ventured outdoors for a respite from the oppressive atmosphere inside. Hercule Poirot, accompanied by Captain Hastings, strolled along a gravel path bordered by vibrant flower beds, his patent leather shoes crunching softly with each step. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and blooming roses. But the tranquility was deceptive, a thin veil over the simmering tensions that had gripped the household since the fire in the study. Lady Beatrice, determined to maintain a sense of normalcy, had suggested a walk in the grounds, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of unease. The group moved in loose clusters, Charles Ashford and Eleanor Vance ahead, their conversation muted and sporadic. Dr. Malcolm Reid, walking alone, his hands clasped behind his back as if deep in thought. Miss Clara Henshaw and Mr. Victor Langley bringing up the rear, her sharp remarks eliciting occasional chuckles from the solicitor. Poirot, ever observant, noted the dynamics. The way Charles glanced back at his aunt with a mix of concern and impatience, how Eleanor's posture stiffened when Reid approached. The subtle distance Henshaw kept from Langley despite their banter. The body language. Hastings, he murmured. It speaks volumes where words do not. See how they orbit Lady Beatrice, like planets around a sun, each pulled by their own gravity of motives. Hastings nodded, his gaze sweeping the woods that bordered the estate. It's all very well, Poirot, but after that note, I'd feel safer indoors. The rose will burn again. Chilling stuff. Do you think the culprit's among us? Before Poirot could reply, a sharp crack echoed from the woods, the unmistakable report of a gunshot. Birds scattered from the trees, and the group froze, hearts pounding. Lady Beatrice, who had been bending to admire a cluster of late-blooming asters, straightened abruptly, her face draining of colour. What was that? She gasped, her hand clutching at her throat. Chaos ensued, briefly shouts of alarm, hasty glances toward the tree line, but Poirot was already in motion, his short legs carrying him swiftly toward the sound. Hastings followed, his military instincts kicking in as he scanned for danger. The others trailed behind, Charles supporting his aunt, Eleanor lingering at the edge with a look of detached curiosity. In the woods, beneath an ancient oak, Poirot knelt, his keen eyes spotting a fresh scar on the bark. Embedded in the trunk, mere inches from where Lady Beatrice would have stood had she not paused at the flowers, was a bullet. He extracted it carefully with a handkerchief, examining its caliber. A rifle shot, Hastings, he said, his voice grave, deliberate, and from a distance. This was no hunter's stray. The estate's rifles, stored in a locked gun room, were accounted for, Jarvis confirming that the key had remained in his possession. No one admitted to firing the shot, and a search of the woods yielded no weapon, only trampled underbrush suggesting a hasty retreat. Back at the manor, the guests gathered in the drawing room, the air thick with accusation. Lady Beatrice sat, rigidly, her composure cracking. First the fire, then the note, now this, she whispered. Someone wants me dead. Poirot paced slowly, his hands behind his back. None, madame, not necessarily dead. Frightened, oui. The shot missed but was... It meant to. Like the fire, it is a warning, escalating the threat. The handkerchief, the rose, the bullet, they are symbols, connected by a thread of malice. Hastings, examining the bullet, frowned. But who, Poirot? Everyone was with us on the walk. Number 1 slipped away. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Ah, but appearances deceive, mon ami. The woods are vast, the timing precise. Someone planned this, perhaps with an accomplice, or perhaps alone, using the walk as cover. We must consider not only alibis, but opportunities and secrets. As evening fell, the manor seemed to close in, its halls echoing with unspoken fears. Poirot, sipping his tisane, felt his little grey cells humming. The motive remained elusive, but the pattern was emerging, a campaign of terror building toward an unknown climax, and he, Hercule Poirot, would be ready when it came. Chapter 5. The secret in the library. The air in Larchwood Manor had grown taut as a violin string, each creak of the floorboards and rustle of the curtains amplifying the unease that had settled over the household. The gunshot in the woods, following so closely on the heels of the fire and the threatening note, had cast a pall over the guests, their faces etched with suspicion and fear. Hercule Poirot, however, remained a beacon of calm, his meticulous demeanour unshaken as he sipped his morning tisane in the parlour. The little grey cells, he knew, thrived in such tension, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that grew more intricate with each passing hour. Captain Hastings, ever the man of action, was restless, pacing the room with a furrowed brow. "This is getting out of hand, Poirot," he said, his voice low but urgent. "First a fire, then a note, now a bullet. We're no closer to catching the culprit, and Lady Beatrice looks like she's at her wit's end. What's next?" Poirot set down his cup, his green eyes gleaming with purpose. "Next, mon ami, we delve deeper. The incidents, they are not random. The handkerchief, the rose, the bullet, they form a narrative, a story told by someone with a purpose. To understand it, we must uncover the secrets of this house, and I suspect they lie not only in the hearts of its guests, but in its very walls." Determined to explore the manor's hidden corners, Poirot turned his attention to the library, a cavernous room lined with shelves of leather-bound volumes, their spines glinting in the muted light filtering through tall windows. The air was heavy with the scent of old paper and polished wood, a sanctuary of knowledge that seemed to hum with untold stories. Poirot moved methodically, his fingers trailing along the shelves, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. Hastings followed, his curiosity piqued but his patience thin. "What are we looking for, Poirot?" he asked, peering over Poirot's shoulder. "Books don't start fires or fire bullets. Nan, Hastings, but books conceal," Poirot replied, his voice soft. "In a house such as this, secrets are often hidden in plain sight. A letter, a journal, a misplaced document, such things can reveal the heart of a mystery." His search was rewarded when he noticed a slight irregularity in the shelving near a section of historical tomes. A panel, cleverly disguised as part of the bookcase, yielded to his gentle pressure, revealing a small compartment. Inside lay a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon, their paper yellowed with age. Poirot's heart quickened as he untied the bundle, revealing the elegant script of Sir Henry Ashford, Lady Beatrice's late husband. The letters were addressed to a woman named Margaret, their tone intimate, almost tender, suggesting a relationship far beyond the bounds of propriety. "Hastings," Poirot said, holding up a letter, "this is most significant. These letters, they speak of love, of promises, of a woman who was not Lady Beatrice. This Margaret, she was close to Sir Henry, perhaps too close." Hastings's eyes widened. "An affair? Good Lord, Poirot, that's a scandal. Do you think Lady Beatrice knew?" Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "It is possible, mon ami. The handkerchief, with its crimson rose, was a gift from Sir Henry. Perhaps it was not only a memento, but a reminder of his betrayal. If these letters were to be made public, they could ruin Lady Beatrice's reputation, even now." Returning to the parlour, Poirot requested a private audience with Lady Beatrice, who joined him with a look of weary resignation. Her silver hair was impeccably arranged, but her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them before her. Madame Poirot began, his tone gentle but direct. "I have found something in the library letters from your late husband to a woman named Margaret. They suggest an indiscretion. Were you aware of this?" Lady Beatrice's face tightened, her grey eyes clouding with pain. "Yes," she admitted, her voice low. "Margaret was a maid here years ago. Henry cared for her. I discovered the letters after his death. I forgave him, Monsieur Poirot, but I could not destroy them. They were a part of him, and I loved him still. And this," Margaret Poirot pressed, "what became of her?" "She was dismissed," Lady Beatrice said, her voice barely audible. "I gave her a small sum to start anew, but I heard she fell into poverty. I believe she died some years ago. The scandal was buried, or so I thought." Poirot's mind raced. The letters were a motive, a thread connecting the past to the present. Had someone uncovered this secret? Was the fire, the note, the gunshot all part of a campaign to expose or punish Lady Beatrice for her husband's sins? "Madame," he said, "these letters, they are a danger to you. Someone knows of them, or suspects." The handkerchief is a symbol of that past, none. Its burning was meant to wound you, to remind you. Lady Beatrice nodded, her composure fraying. "I fear you are right, but who would know, and why now?" As the afternoon waned, Poirot and Hastings walked. The grounds, the detective's mind turning over the new discovery. The letters suggested a motive rooted in betrayal, but the players remained elusive. Was it Charles, desperate for his inheritance and perhaps privy to family secrets? Eleanor, resentful of her stepmother's control and eager to tarnish her? Name, or another Reid, Henshaw or Langley, with their own shadows. Hastings, kicking a pebble along the path, looked troubled. "This is a nasty business, Poirot. Those letters there, like a ghost from the past, stirring up trouble. But how do they connect to the bullet?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The bullet, the fire, the note, they are all part of the same story, Hastings. A story of vengeance, perhaps, or of greed. The letters, they are a clue, but not the whole picture. We must look closer, listen more carefully. The truth, it is here, waiting for Hercule Poirot to find it." As dusk settled over Larchwood Manor, the guests gathered for dinner, their faces a gallery of guarded expressions. Poirot watched them, his eyes missing nothing. The way Charles avoided his aunt's gaze, the way Eleanor's fingers tightened around her glass, the way Reid's spectacles caught the candlelight, concealing his thoughts. The mystery was deepening, the threads tightening, and Poirot knew the next revelation was not far off. Chapter 6. The alibi unravels. The atmosphere in Larchwood Manor had thickened, each moment heavy with the weight of unspoken secrets and mounting dread. The discovery of Sir Henry's letters to Margaret had cast a new shadow over the house, and Hercule Poirot felt the threads of the mystery tightening, drawing him closer to the truth. The morning light filtered weakly through the tall windows, painting the dining room in muted tones as the guests gathered for breakfast. The clatter of cutlery was subdued, the conversation sparse, as if each person feared their words might betray them. Poirot, impeccable in his tailored suit, observed the group with his characteristic intensity, his green eyes darting from face to face. Lady Beatrice, seated at the head of the table, maintained a fragile dignity, though her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her teacup. Charles Ashford, his face drawn, pushed his food around his plate, his restlessness palpable. Eleanor Vance, her auburn hair catching the light, stared out the window, her expression unreadable but tense. Miss Clara Henshaw's sharp gaze flicked between her companions, as if cataloguing their weaknesses, while Mr. Victor Langley, his joviality dimmed, sipped his coffee with a grimace. Dr. Malcolm Reid, however, drew Poirot's particular attention. The physician's calm demeanour, so carefully cultivated, seemed to falter under scrutiny, his fingers drumming faintly on the table. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, leaned close, his voice a whisper. "That red fellow's been awfully quiet, Poirot. Do you think he's hiding something? Those letters, maybe he knows about them." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of his mind at work. "Dr. Reid, he is a man of precision, Hastings, but precision can mask nervousness. His hands, they betray him. We must press him further. For the alibis, they are like sand, slipping through our fingers. Determined to test the physician's story, Poirot sought him out after breakfast, finding him in the conservatory, surrounded by lush ferns and the faint scent of earth. Reid was examining a potted orchid, his movements deliberate, but noted the slight tremor in his fingers as he turned to face him. Dr. Reid, Poirot began, his tone courteous but probing. "You have told me you were in your room, reading, when the fire was set in the study. A medical text, you said. Yet, I wonder, could someone confirm this? The maids, perhaps, or another guest?" Reid adjusted his spectacles, his expression guarded. "I'm afraid I was alone, Monsieur Poirot. My work requires solitude. I was studying a treatise on toxicology, hardly light reading, but necessary for my practice." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "And the lamp oil, Docteur? The fire in the study, it was fueled by oil, carefully applied. You, as a man of science, might have access to such substances, Nan." Reid's jaw tightened, a flash of irritation crossing his face. "I keep a small vial of oil for experiments, yes, but it's locked in my medical bag. I had no reason to be near the study, and I certainly didn't set any fire." Before Poirot could press further, a maid, a young woman with nervous eyes, approached, her voice hesitant. "Begging your pardon, sir, but I heard you talking about the fire. I saw something that night. Dr. Reid, he was in the corridor near the study, just before dinner. He had a small bottle in his hand, looked like oil to me." Reid's face flushed, and he stepped forward, his voice sharp. "That's preposterous. I was carrying a vial of antiseptic, not lamp oil. This is a misunderstanding." Poirot's gaze remained steady. "A misunderstanding, perhaps, but one that requires clarification. Dr. Reid, you will permit me to examine your medical bag? Oui." Reid hesitated, then nodded curtly, leading Poirot and Hastings to his room. The bag, a worn leather case, contained an array of medical supplies, including a small vial of lamp oil, its label faded but unmistakable. Reid's explanation that it was for sterilizing equipment rung hollow, and Poirot noted the physician's increasing agitation. "You see, Hastings," Poirot murmured as they left Reid's room. "The alibi, it unravels. Dr. Reid, he is not what he seems. But is he our arsonist, or merely a piece of the puzzle?" Meanwhile, Hastings had been busy in the village, where he'd overheard a tantalizing rumor at the local pub. A villager, loosening his tongue with ale, mentioned seeing Charles Ashford arguing with a mysterious woman in a hooded cloak days before the fire. The description was vague, but the encounter was heated, suggesting a connection to the manor's troubles. Returning to the manor, Hastings shared his findings with Poirot as they walked the grounds. "What do you make of it, Poirot? Could this woman be Margaret, back from the dead, or someone else with a grudge?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Margaret, she is gone, but her shadow lingers. This woman, she may be a key. We must learn more, Hastings. The letters, the fire, the gunshot, they are all tied to the past, and this woman, she may be the link." As evening descended, the manor seemed to pulse with secrets, its corridors whispering of betrayal and hidden motives. Poirot, sipping his tisane in the parlour, felt the mystery coalescing. Dr. Reid's shaky alibi, the village rumour, the letters to Margaret, they were threads in a tapestry, and he was determined to weave them together before the next act of this deadly drama unfolded. Chapter 7. The Twist of the Past. The morning mist clung stubbornly to the grounds of Larchwood Manor, shrouding the ancient oaks and rose beds in a veil that seemed to mirror the mystery enveloping the house. Hercule Poirot stood at his window, his silhouette precise against the dim light, his mind a whirl of deductions. The unraveling of Dr. Reid's alibi and the village rumor of Charles Ashford's encounter with the mysterious woman had added new layers to the puzzle. The fire, the threatening note, the gunshot, and the letters to Margaret, they were not disparate events, but chapters in a story of vengeance. And Poirot was determined to read its conclusion. Breakfast was a tense affair, the guests' faces etched with fatigue and suspicion. Lady Beatrice, her silver hair impeccably arranged, presided with a strained dignity, her eyes flickering to the door as if anticipating another shock. Charles Ashford, his hands misshapen, hands fidgeting, avoided her gaze, while Eleanor Vance, her expression as sullen as ever, sipped her tea with mechanical indifference. Dr. Malcolm Reid, his spectacles glinting, maintained a facade of calm, though his fingers betrayed a nervous twitch. Miss Clara Henshaw's sharp eyes darted about, her lips pursed in a way that suggested she was savouring the drama. Mr. Victor Langley, his joviality subdued, focused on his plate, his usual laughter. Absent, Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, leaned close, his voice low. "That business with Reid's oil vial is damning, Poirot. And Charles meeting some woman in the village. It's like a plot from one of those penny dreadfuls. What's your next move?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "The next move, mon ami, is to uncover the identity of this woman. The letters to Margaret, they are the key. If she is not dead, as Lady Beatrice believes, or if someone acts in her name, we must find her. And Dr. Reid, his secrets are unraveling. But there is more to learn." Determined to probe deeper into the past, Poirot requested a photograph of Margaret from Lady Beatrice, who hesitated before retrieving a small, faded image from a locked drawer in her boudoir. The photograph showed a young woman with delicate features and dark, expressive eyes, her smile tinged with a sadness that intrigued Poirot. He studied it carefully, noting the resemblance to someone he could not yet place. A shadow of recognition teasing his little grey cells. Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing room, ostensibly for tea, but his true purpose was observation. He passed the photograph among them, watching their reactions closely. Charles's face paled slightly, his fingers tightening on the frame. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition crossing her features before she masked it with indifference. Reid's gaze lingered on the image, his jaw tightening, while Langley's expression remained bland, though his hand shook as he passed it back. Miss Clara Henshaw, however, froze, her sharp features hardening into a mask of shock. "Mademoiselle Henshaw," Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing, "you know this woman, do you not? There is a resemblance, I think, in the eyes, the shape of the face. She is not a stranger to you." Clara's lips tightened, her blue eyes flashing with defiance. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice low and bitter. Her name was Margaret Henshaw, my sister. She was a maid here years ago, until Sir Henry ruined her. He promised her love, a future, but when Beatrice found out, Margaret was cast out, left to die in poverty. I came here to see justice done, Monsieur Poirot, but I did not set that fire or fire that shot. The room fell silent, the weight of her confession settling like dust. Lady Beatrice's face was ashen, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. Charles stared at the floor. Eleanor's eyes glinted with something akin to satisfaction. Reid remained impassive, and Langley reached for his glass, his hand steadier now. Poirot's mind raced. Clara's revelation was a pivot, a twist that reframed the mystery. Margaret's sister, nursing a grudge for years, had infiltrated the manor under the guise of a distant cousin. Was her presence mere coincidence, or was she orchestrating the threats, the fire, the note, the gunshot to punish Lady Beatrice for her sister's downfall? And the handkerchief, Mademoiselle? Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. It was Margaret's, was it not? A gift from Sir Henry, perhaps. Clara's smile was thin, almost cruel. It was one of a pair. Margaret embroidered them. Both, but Henry gave one to Beatrice, a mockery of his promises to my sister. I knew Beatrice cherished it. Seeing it burn, that would hurt her most. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. You have motive, Mademoiselle Henshaw, an opportunity, but the truth it is not yet complete. You are one piece of the puzzle, but there are others. As the guests dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the silent halls, Poirot turned to Hastings. CL Clara, she seeks vengeance, but is she the hand that lit the fire? Or is she a shadow, distracting us from another? The little grey cells, they tell me there is more to uncover. Hastings frowned, his mind struggling to keep pace. If Clara's telling the truth, then who else is involved? Reid's alibi is shaky, and Charles's meeting with that woman. What's it all mean? Poirot smiled faintly. It means, mon ami, that the past is not dead. It lives, it breathes, and it seeks retribution. But Hercule Poirot will find the hand that wields it. The manor settled into an uneasy dusk, its walls whispering of betrayals, old and new. The mystery was no longer a single thread, but a tapestry, and Poirot was determined to unravel it before the next act of vengeance struck. Chapter 8. The solicitor's secret. The evening shadows deepened over Larchwood Manor, casting long, wavering patterns across the polished floors as if the house itself were conspiring to conceal its truths. Hercule Poirot sat in the parlour, his tisane cooling untouched on the table beside him, his mind alight with the revelations of the day. Clara Henshaw's confession that she was Margaret's sister, driven by a thirst for justice, had shifted the mystery's landscape, but Poirot sensed the puzzle was far from complete. The fire, the threatening note, the gunshot, and now the spectre of a betrayed sister, they were pieces of a larger design, and the little grey cells were humming with anticipation. Dinner had been a strained affair, the guests' faces a gallery of guarded expressions, their voices hushed as if wary of the walls themselves. Lady Beatrice, her composure fraying like worn silk, had retired early, pleading a headache. Charles Ashford's nervous energy had intensified, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the tablecloth. Eleanor Vance's sullen demeanour had hardened into a mask of defiance, her green eyes darting toward Clara with thinly veiled contempt. Dr. Malcolm Reid maintained his aloof calm, though his spectacles could not hide the flicker of unease in his gaze. Miss Clara Henshaw, her sharp features set in a defiant smirk, seemed to revel in the tension she had stirred. Only Mr. Victor Langley, the solicitor, clung to his jovial facade, though his laughter rang hollow, his florid complexion betraying a night of excess. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot in the parlour, was restless, his fingers tapping the arm of his chair. Clara's story changes things, Poirot, he said, his voice low. She's got every reason to hate Lady Beatrice, but do you think she's behind it all? The fire, the note, the shot. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching faintly. Mademoiselle Henshaw, she is a catalyst, Hastings, but not the whole story. Her motive is clear vengeance for her sister, but her actions, they are too theatrical. The fire, the note, they are bold, yet they do not destroy. Someone else, I think, pulls the strings. Determined to probe deeper, Poirot turned his attention to Mr. Victor Langley, whose boisterous demeanor seemed increasingly like a shield. He found the solicitor in the billiard room, a glass of brandy in hand. His tie loosened and his face flushed. The clack of billiard balls punctuated the silence as Langley lined up a shot, his movements unsteady. "Monsieur Langley," Poirot began, his tone courteous but incisive, "you are a man of the law, accustomed to secrets and their consequences. The events, here the fire, the note, the gunshot, they suggest a knowledge of Lady Beatrice's past. You were her husband's solicitor, were you not? What do you know of Margaret, and of the handkerchief?" Langley missed his shot, the cue ball skittering across the table. He straightened, wiping his brow with a handkerchief that reeked of spirits. "You're a sharp one, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "Yes, I handled Sir Henry's affairs. Margaret, a sad business. She was a maid, pretty thing, got herself in trouble with Henry. Beatrice sent her packing, and I drew up the papers to settle it quietly." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Papers, you say? To settle what, precisely?" Langley hesitated, his gaze dropping to his glass. "A bequest. Henry left Margaret a small sum in his will, enough to start over. But Beatrice, she wouldn't have it. She insisted I alter the will after his death, cut Margaret out entirely. I did it, but it never sat right with me." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but relentless. "And this alteration, it was legal, or did it require persuasion?" Langley's face reddened further, his hand trembling as he set down his glass. "It was legal, but it was wrong. I've carried that guilt for years. When I saw that handkerchief burn, I thought, maybe someone knows, maybe someone's digging up the past. And the note, the gunshot," Poirot pressed. "You believe they are connected to this secret?" Langley nodded, his voice barely audible. "I don't know who, but someone's stirring the pot. I swear, though it wasn't me, I was here, playing billiards, when the fire started. And in the woods I was with Clara when that shot rang out." Poirot's mind raced. Langley's confession added a new thread to the tapestry: a tampered will, a silenced bequest, and a solicitor burdened by guilt. Was he merely a witness to the past, or had his actions sparked the current vendetta? The handkerchief, a symbol of Margaret's betrayal, tied it all together. But the orchestrator remained elusive. Hastings, who had listened silently, spoke up as they left the billiard room. "Langley's in deep, Poirot. Altering a will. That's a motive for someone to come after Beatrice. But he's too much of a wreck to pull off something this calculated, don't you think?" Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Oui, mon ami, Langley. He is a man of weakness, not cunning. But his secret, it points to others who may have cause to act someone who knew of Margaret's loss, someone who seeks retribution." As night fell, the manor seemed to hum with secrets, its corridors alive with whispers of the past. Poirot, standing by the parlour window, gazed out at the moonlit gardens, his thoughts a whirl of connections. The letters, Clara's vendetta, Langley's guilt, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture was incomplete. The next move, he knew, would require precision, for the unseen hand behind these acts was growing bolder, and Hercule Poirot was determined to unmask it before it struck again. Chapter 9. The nighttime confession. The night wrapped Larchwood Manor in a shroud of silence, broken only by the occasional creak of settling timbers and the distant hoot of an owl. The events of the past days, the fire, the threatening note, the gunshot, and the revelations of Margaret's betrayal and Langley's tampered will had woven a web of suspicion that tightened around the guests. Hercule Poirot, seated in his room by a small fire, his tisane, long since cooled, felt the pulse of the mystery quickening. The little grey cells were alight, sorting through motives and secrets, seeking the thread that would unravel the truth. As the clock struck midnight, a soft knock at his door broke the stillness. Poirot, ever alert, rose and opened it to find Eleanor Vance. Her auburn hair loose about her shoulders, her face pale and streaked with tears. Her usual sullen demeanor was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability that surprised him. "Mademoiselle Vance," Poirot said, his voice gentle but probing. "It is late for a visit. What brings you here?" Eleanor hesitated, twisting her hands together. "I can't keep it in any longer, Monsieur Poirot," she whispered. I did something terrible. I need to tell you before it's too late." Poirot ushered her inside, seating her by the fire. He noted the tremor in her voice, the way her eyes darted to the shadows, as if expecting pursuit. "Speak, mademoiselle," he said, his tone calm but insistent. "What is this terrible thing you have done?" Eleanor took a shuddering breath, her words tumbling out. "The gunshot in the woods, it was me. I fired the rifle. I wanted to scare Beatrice, to make her leave the estate. She controls everything, my father's money, my life, my future. I thought if she was frightened enough, she'd go back to London and let me breathe." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. "The rifle, mademoiselle, where did you obtain it?" "The gun room was locked, was it not?" She nodded, her voice barely audible. "There's a spare key, hidden in the library. I found it years ago, when I was a child. I took the rifle before the walk, hid it in the woods, and fired when no one was looking. I didn't mean to hurt her, I swear, just to frighten her." "And the fire, the note?" Poirot pressed, his gaze unwavering. "Were they your doing as well?" Eleanor shook her head vehemently. "No, I know nothing about the fire or the note. The handkerchief, that's Beatrice's obsession, not mine. I only wanted her gone, not harmed." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Eleanor's confession was a piece of the puzzle, but it did not complete it. The gunshot, a reckless act of desperation, fit her resentment. But the fire and the note bore a different signature, calculated, symbolic, tied to Margaret's past. Was Eleanor a lone actor, or had her actions been exploited by another? "You have been candid, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. "But you must understand, your actions have consequences. The law, it does not look kindly on such reckless deeds. Why come to me now?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm afraid. After Clara's confession about Margaret and Langley's talk of the will, I realized this is bigger than me. Someone else is out there doing these things, and I don't want to be blamed for what I didn't do." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Return to your room, mademoiselle. Say nothing of this to the others. Hercule Poirot will handle what comes next." As Eleanor slipped away, her footsteps fading into the night, Poirot turned to Captain Hastings, who had been roused by the commotion and now stood in the doorway, his face a mix of shock and curiosity. "Good. Lord Poirot," Hastings whispered, Eleanor firing the shot. "That's a twist I didn't see coming. But if she's telling the truth, who's behind the fire and the note?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the firelight. The fire, the note, they are the work of another hand, Hastings. Eleanor, she is a pawn, her act of rebellion used to deepen the fear. The handkerchief, it remains the key. Its burning was no accident, but a message, and we must find the sender. The manor slept uneasily, its halls whispering of secrets yet to be uncovered. Poirot, alone with his thoughts, felt the mystery closing in. Eleanor's confession had illuminated one corner of the puzzle, but the shadows remained, and he knew the next revelation would bring him closer to the heart of the darkness that haunted Larchwood Manor. Chapter 10. The handkerchief's cloak. The dawn broke over Larchwood Manor with a reluctant light, as if the sun itself hesitated to illuminate the secrets festering within its walls. Hercule Poirot, ever the early riser, stood before his mirror, adjusting his tie with the precision of a sculptor. The events of the previous night, Eleanor Vance's tearful confession that she fired the gunshot in the woods, had added a new thread to the intricate tapestry of the mystery. Yet Poirot's little grey cells were restless, sensing that the heart of the matter still lay with the handkerchief, its crimson rose a beacon of meaning in the chaos of fire, note, and bullet. Breakfast was a muted affair, the guests' faces drawn with the strain of sleepless nights and unspoken accusations. Lady Beatrice, her composure a fragile veneer, sipped her tea with trembling hands, her eyes avoiding the others. Charles Ashford's nervous energy had morphed into a sullen silence, his fork idle on his plate. Eleanor Vance, pale but composed, kept her gaze fixed on the table, as if fearing her secret might spill from her eyes. Dr. Malcolm Reid's calm facade held, though his fingers betrayed a faint tremor as he buttered his toast. Miss Clara Henshaw's sharp features were alight with a knowing glint, her lips curved in a faint, enigmatic smile. Mr. Victor Langley, his joviality now a distant memory, ate mechanically, his bloodshot eyes darting to the door. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, leaned close, his voice a whisper. Eleanor's confession throws a wrench in things, Poirot. If she fired the shot, who's left for the fire and the note? Clara's got motive, Reid's got that dodgy alibi, and Langley's hiding something. But it's that handkerchief that keeps nagging at me. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind's relentless activity. Oui, mon ami, the handkerchief fit is the pivot of this drama. Its burning was no mere act of destruction, but a message, carefully crafted. We must examine it again, for it holds a clue we have overlooked. With Lady Beatrice's permission, Poirot retrieved the handkerchief from its velvet-lined box, where it had been stored since the fire. He spread it carefully on a table in the library, its charred edges stark against the cream fabric, the crimson rose still vivid despite the damage. Under the morning light, he studied it with a jeweler's precision, his magnifying glass hovering over the intricate stitches. Then his eyes narrowed, a spark of revelation igniting. "Hastings," he said, his voice low with excitement, "regard the embroidery, it is not as it seems. The rose, it is exquisite, but there is something more, a tiny initial, hidden in the petals. An M, so small it could be missed. This is not the work of Lady Beatrice's mother-in-law, as she claimed. This is Margaret's mark." Hastings peered over his shoulder, squinting at the delicate stitching. "Good Lord, Poirot, you're right. An M for Margaret. But why would she embroider her initial so secretly?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Because, mon ami, this handkerchief was not meant for Lady Beatrice alone. It was a token, perhaps, of Margaret's claimer, silent defiance. The fire, it was meant to reveal this mark, to taunt Lady Beatrice with her husband's betrayal. The one who set it knew its significance. Returning the handkerchief to its box, Poirot paced the library, his mind weaving connections. The M suggested a deeper purpose, a motive rooted in Margaret's past. Clara, as Margaret's sister, had reason to use the handkerchief as a weapon, but her confession had been one of intent, not action. Dr. Reid's shaky alibi and Langley's tampered will pointed to their own secrets. But the precision of the fire suggested a mind more calculating than either man's. Eleanor's gunshot, an act of impulsive rebellion, seemed disconnected from the handkerchief's symbolism. Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression resolute. We must consider, Hastings, that the fire was not meant to destroy the handkerchief entirely, but to expose it to show the M to Lady Beatrice, to wound her with the past. This is a game of emotions, not just of threats. Hastings frowned, his mind struggling to keep pace. So, someone wanted Beatrice to see that M and suffer. That's cruel, Poirot, but who? Clara's the obvious choice, but she swears. She didn't set the fire. We, Poirot said, and I believe her, for now. The truth, it lies in the interplay of these motives: Clara's vengeance, Eleanor's desperation, Reid's secrets, Langley's guilt. But there is a hand guiding this, and we will find it. As the day unfolded, the manor's atmosphere grew heavier. The guests moving like actors in a play, their roles unclear but their tension palpable. Poirot, his mind alight with the handkerchief's clue, knew the next act was imminent. The M was a whisper from the past, and he was determined to make it speak before the unseen hand struck again. Chapter 11. The trap is set. The tension within Larchwood Manor had reached a fever pitch, the air thick with suspicion as the guests moved through the day like pieces on a chessboard, each maneuver fraught with hidden intent. Hercule Poirot, his mind a crucible of deduction, felt the mystery nearing its climax. The discovery of the tiny M embroidered on the handkerchief had illuminated a motive rooted in Margaret's past. But the orchestrator of the fire, the note, and the gunshot remained elusive. The little grey cells, however, were undaunted, and Poirot resolved to force the culprit's hand with a stratagem of his own. The morning was overcast, the sky a leaden canopy that mirrored the mood within the manor. Breakfast passed in near silence, the clink of porcelain and the rustle of napkins the only sounds as Lady Beatrice presided with a weary grace. Charles Ashford's eyes were shadowed, his fingers twitching as he avoided his aunt's gaze. Eleanor Vance, her confession of the gunshot weighing heavily, kept her head bowed, her auburn hair a curtain shielding her from scrutiny. Dr. Malcolm Reid's calm was a brittle facade, his spectacles glinting as he glanced at the others. Miss Clara Henshaw's sharp features were alight with a predatory intensity, while Mr. Victor Langley's forced cheer had dwindled to a nervous murmur. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, whispered that M on the handkerchief sits. A bombshell, Poirot. Someone's playing a cruel game with Beatrice's past. But how do we catch them? They've been one step ahead. Poirot's eyes twinkled, his voice low. Mon ami, when the quarry is clever, one does not chase it. Is better to set a trap. The handkerchief, it is the bait, and we shall see who cannot resist its lure. After breakfast, Poirot requested a private meeting with Lady Beatrice, who met him in the parlour, her hands clasped tightly as if to steady her nerves. Madame, he said, I propose a plan. The handkerchief, it is the key to this mystery. I will place a decoy, a replica in the study, where it was first attacked. We will watch, and the one who seeks to harm it again will reveal themselves. Lady Beatrice's eyes widened, but she nodded. "Do what you must, Monsieur Poirot. I trust your judgment." With Jarvis's assistance, Poirot procured a handkerchief of similar design, its crimson rose meticulously replicated by a village seamstress summoned earlier that day. He placed it on the study desk, its cream fabric stark against the polished wood, and ensured the room was dimly lit, the curtains half drawn to create shadows for concealment. He then gathered the guests in the drawing room, his demeanor grave, but commanding. "Madame et messieurs," he announced, "I have news. The mystery of the fire, the note, and the gunshots, it is close to resolution. The handkerchief, it holds the secret, and I have placed it in the study once more. Tonight, we will see who dares to strike again." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. Poirot dismissed them, instructing them to retire early. But he and Hastings took up positions in the study, concealed behind a heavy bookcase that offered a clear view of the desk. The hours ticked by, the manor settling into a restless quiet. The only sounds, the ticking of a clock and the occasional creak of the house. At midnight. A shadow moved in the doorway. A figure, cloaked in darkness, crept toward the desk, their movements stealthy but deliberate. Poirot's heart quickened as the figure reached for the handkerchief, producing a small vial lamp oil, unmistakable by its glint in the moonlight. Before they could strike a match, Poirot stepped from the shadows, his voice cutting through the silence. "Arrêtez, Dr. Reid," he declared, his tone sharp. "The game, it is over." Dr. Reid froze, the vial slipping from his hand to clatter. On the floor, his face, pale in the dim light, was a mask of shock and resignation. The other guests, roused by the commotion, gathered at the door, their gasps mingling with the night's chill air. Hastings emerged, his expression triumphant. "Got you, Red. You're the one behind the fire." Poirot raised a hand, his eyes fixed on the physician. "Not so fast, mon ami. Dr. Reid, you will explain. Why the handkerchief? Why the oil, again?" Reid's shoulders sagged, his voice low. I meant only to frighten her. The handkerchief, it was Margaret's, a symbol of her pain. I knew its significance, and I wanted Beatrice to feel that same pain, to know her past wasn't buried. Poirot nodded, his gaze unrelenting. "And the note, the gunshot?" Reid shook his head. "The note was mine, yes, to keep her afraid. But the gunshot, that wasn't me. I swear it." The guests murmured, their eyes darting to Eleanor, who stood silent, her confession already known to Poirot. The trap had worked, but the mystery was not yet fully unraveled. Poirot knew another hand was at play, and the night was not over. Chapter 12. The doctor's motive to study of Larchwood Manor stood frozen in the moonlight, the air charged with the weight of Dr. Malcolm Reid's capture. Hercule Poirot, his silhouette sharp against the dim glow, faced the physician, whose spectacles glinted with a mix of defiance and despair. The decoy handkerchief lay untouched on the desk, its crimson rose a silent witness to the drama unfolding. The other guests, gathered at the doorway, stared in stunned silence, their faces a gallery of shock, relief, and lingering suspicion. Captain Hastings, standing beside Poirot, gripped the recovered vial of lamp oil, his expression a blend of triumph and confusion. "Dr. Reid," Poirot said, his voice calm but piercing, "you have been caught in the act, preparing to repeat. The crime of the fire, the handkerchief, the note, they are your work. But the gunshot, you say, is not. Explain yourself, monsieur, and do not conceal the truth from Hercule Poirot." Reid's shoulders slumped, his hands trembling as he removed his spectacles, rubbing his eyes as if to banish the weight of his actions. I meant no harm, not truly," he began, his voice low and strained. "Margaret Henshaw was my fiancée years ago, before she came to this house. She loved Sir Henry, believed his promises, but he abandoned her, and Lady Beatrice cast her out. Margaret died in poverty, broken-hearted. I came here to make Beatrice suffer, to remind her of the pain she caused." The guests gasped. Clara Henshaw's sharp intake of breath cutting through the silence. Her blue eyes blazed, but she said nothing, her lips pressed into a thin line. Lady Beatrice, pale and trembling, clutched the doorframe, her grey eyes wide with realization. Poirot's gaze remained steady. "And so, you chose the handkerchief, monsieur, because it was Margaret's creation, a symbol of her betrayal. You doused it with oil, set the fire, and wrote the note. 'The rose will burn again,' to torment Lady Beatrice with her past." Reid nodded, his voice barely audible. "Yes, the fire was meant to scare her, to make her feel the guilt I've carried for years. I didn't want to destroy the handkerchief completely, just enough to show the M Margaret embroidered, to rub her nose in it. The note was to keep her afraid, to make her think it wasn't over. And tonight," Poirot pressed, "you returned to repeat the act. Why?" Reid's eyes flickered with desperation. "Because she didn't break. She stayed composed, defiant. I wanted her to crack, to admit what she did to Margaret. But I swear, the gunshot that wasn't me. I'd never go that far." Poirot turned to Eleanor Vance, whose pale face betrayed her guilt. "Mademoiselle Vance has confessed to the gunshot, an act of her own rebellion. But you, Dr. Reid, you knew of the handkerchief's significance. How?" Reid hesitated, then spoke. "Margaret told me about it before she died. She embroidered 2 handkerchiefs, one for herself, one for Beatrice. As a cruel jest from Sir Henry, she hid her initial in the rose, a secret only she and I knew. When I saw Beatrice carrying it, I knew it was my chance." Hastings' brow furrowed, whispered to Poirot, "It fits, Poirot, but something's off. Reid's confessed to the fire and the note, Eleanor to the gunshot. Are we missing someone else?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind racing. "Oui, mon ami, the pieces fit, but the picture is incomplete. Dr. Reid, he is a man driven by grief, but his actions are precise, controlled. There is another, I think, who has used his anger, perhaps guided it." Clara Henshaw stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You think I'm involved, don't you, Monsieur Poirot? Because of Margaret, my sister. I hated Beatrice, yes, but I didn't set that fire or write that note." Poirot raised a hand, his expression unreadable. "Patience, mademoiselle. The truth, it reveals itself in time. Dr. Reid, you will remain under watch until the authorities are summoned. But the mystery, it is not yet solved." As Jarvis escorted Reid to his room, the guests dispersed, their whispers echoing in the darkened halls. Poirot, standing alone in the study, gazed at the decoy handkerchief, its rose a mockery of the truth. The motive was clear, but the hand behind it all was still hidden, and he knew the final act was yet to come. Chapter 13. The final twist. The night had settled over Larchwood Manor like a velvet curtain, its silence punctuated only by the faint ticking of clocks and the occasional groan of the ancient house. Hercule Poirot stood in the study, the scene of the first crime, his eyes fixed on the decoy handkerchief still resting on the desk. Dr. Reid's confession had illuminated much. The fire and the threatening note were his acts of vengeance for Margaret's ruin, but the gunshot, claimed by Eleanor Vance, and the lingering sense of an unseen orchestrator kept Poirot's little grey cells in a state of restless activity. The mystery, he knew, was not yet complete. A final twist awaited, hidden in the shadows of motives and secrets. The morning dawned with a brittle clarity, the sky a pale blue that did little to lift the gloom within the manor. Breakfast was a sombre ritual, the guests' faces etched with exhaustion and unease. Lady Beatrice, her silver hair a stark contrast to her pallor, sat with a forced dignity, her hands clasped tightly. Charles Ashford, his nervous energy subdued, stared at his plate, while Eleanor Vance, her confession weighing heavily, avoided all eyes. Miss Clara Henshaw's sharp features were alight with a defiant intensity, her gaze flicking to Poirot, as if challenging him to unravel her role. Mr. Victor Langley, his jovial mask discarded, sipped his coffee in silence, his bloodshot eyes betraying a sleepless night. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, leaned close, his voice a whisper. Reid's confession ties up the fire, and the note. Poirot and Eleanor's got the gunshot. But you're not satisfied, are you? There's something else, isn't there? Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with purpose. Oui, mon ami. Dr. Reid, he is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole. The handkerchief, its M. It was meant to be seen, to wound Lady Beatrice. But why? The fire was a spectacle, not a destruction. Someone else, I think, has used Reid's grief, perhaps even guided his hand, determined to expose the final layer of the mystery. Poirot returned to the handkerchief, now safely returned to Lady Beatrice's velvet box. He requested to examine it once more, and in the quiet of the library, he studied its charred edges under a magnifying glass. The tiny M, hidden in the rose's petals, was indeed Margaret's mark. But something else caught his eye, a faint irregularity in the stitching. A subtle alteration that suggested the initial had been added later, not by Margaret, but by another hand. Regard as Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low with excitement. This M, it is not original. It was embroidered after the handkerchief was made, with thread that does not quite match. Someone altered it, to ensure it pointed to Margaret's memory. Hastings's eyes widened. Good Lord, Poirot, you mean someone tampered with it? But who, and why? Poirot's mind raced, the threads of the mystery converging. To frame the past, mon ami. To make Lady Beatrice believe Margaret's ghost was rising against her. This is not just vengeance, it is manipulation. Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing room, his demeanor calm but commanding. Madame et messieurs, he announced, the mystery of Larchwood Manor is nearly solved. Dr. Reid, he has confessed to the fire and the note, driven by his love for Margaret. Mademoiselle Vance, she fired the gunshot, a reckless act of rebellion. But there is another hand, one who has woven these acts into a tapestry of fear. He turned to Clara Henshaw, whose sharp eyes met his with defiance. Mademoiselle Henshaw, you are Margaret's sister. You came here seeking justice, but you did more. You knew of Reid's plan, did you not? You encouraged it, and you altered the handkerchief, adding the M to ensure it pointed to your sister's memory. Clara's face hardened, but she did not deny it. I wanted Beatrice to suffer, she said, her voice cold. I knew Reid was planning to scare her. I added the M to make her think Margaret's ghost was haunting her, but I didn't set the fire or write the note. I only nudged him along. Poirot nodded, his gaze unrelenting. You played a dangerous game, mademoiselle. Your vengeance, it fueled Reid's actions, but it also clouded the truth. The handkerchief, it was your touch that made it a weapon. The guests murmured, their eyes darting between Clara and Lady Beatrice, who stood trembling, her face a mask of realization. Poirot's trap had revealed not just Reid's guilt, but Clara's manipulation, a final twist that tied the threads of the mystery together. As the day closed, the manor seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. Poirot, standing by the window, felt the weight of the truth settle. The final act was near, and he was ready to bring it to its conclusion. Chapter 14. The resolution. The final morning at Larchwood Manor dawned with a serene clarity, the pale sunlight filtering through the tall windows as if to cleanse the house of its lingering shadows. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing room, his posture impeccable, his mind a crucible where the last fragments of the mystery had fused into a coherent whole. The revelations of the previous night, Dr. Reid's confession to the fire and note, Eleanor Vance's admission of the gunshot, and Clara Henshaw's manipulation of the handkerchief had unraveled the tapestry of fear, but the day required one final gathering to lay the truth bare. The guests assembled, their faces a mix of relief and trepidation. Lady Beatrice, her silver hair catching the light, sat with a newfound resolve, her hands steady for the first time in days. Charles Ashford, his nervous energy subdued, stood by the window, his eyes fixed on the gardens. Eleanor Vance, her auburn hair pulled back, met no one's gaze. Her confession a weight she still carried. Dr. Malcolm Reid, under Jarvis's watchful eye, sat rigidly, his spectacles glinting with resignation. Miss Clara Henshaw's sharp features were set in defiance, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of defeat. Mr. Victor Langley, his joviality extinguished, nursed a cup of tea, his hands trembling slightly. Captain Hastings, standing beside Poirot, whispered, "You've got them all on edge, Poirot." Clara's twist with the handkerchief was a shock. But is that the end of it? No one else involved? Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes gleaming. The end, mon ami, is here. The threads, they are woven together, and now we present the tapestry complete. Addressing the room, Poirot's voice was calm but commanding. Madame et messieurs, the mystery of Larchwood Manor is solved. The fire, the note, the gunshot, they were acts of vengeance and rebellion, each with its own author, yet bound by a common thread, the past. Dr. Reid, driven by love for Margaret Henshaw, set the fire and wrote the note to torment Lady Beatrice for her role in Margaret's ruin. Mademoiselle Vance, in her desperation for freedom, fired the gunshot to frighten her stepmother. But Mademoiselle Henshaw, you played a subtler role. You altered the handkerchief, adding the M to ensure. It pointed to your sister's memory, fanning Dr. Reid's grief to serve your own vendetta. Clara's lips tightened, but she did not protest. Lady Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, her voice soft. I never meant for Margaret to suffer so. I was hurt, betrayed, but I should have done more for her. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. Madame, the past cannot be undone, but you can make amends. Dr. Reid and Mademoiselle Vance, they will face the law for their actions. Reid for arson and threats, Vance for reckless endangerment. Mademoiselle Henshaw, your manipulation, though not criminal, was cruel. But I propose a resolution. He turned to Lady Beatrice. In Margaret's name, you could establish a charity, perhaps for women in need, to honor her memory and ease the guilt that haunts you. Lady Beatrice nodded, her voice steady. "I will do it, Monsieur Poirot. It's the least I can do." As the authorities were summoned, Reid and Eleanor were escorted to their rooms to await their fate. Clara, her vengeance unfulfilled, left the manor without a word, her sharp silhouette fading into the morning mist. Langley, his guilt over the tampered will exposed, promised to assist with the charity's legalities, seeking redemption. Charles, relieved of suspicion, vowed to rebuild his life without relying on his aunt's wealth. Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart, the manor's oppressive air lifting at last. As they stood in the hall, Hastings clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "You did it again, old chap. Untangled the whole mess-fire note, gunshot, and that devilish handkerchief." Poirot smiled, adjusting his hat. "The heart, mon ami, is a puzzle as complex as the mind. But the little grey cells, they always prevail." As their car rolled away from Larchwood Manor, the house receded into the distance, its secrets laid bare. The handkerchief, its crimson rose, now a symbol of closure, remained with Lady Beatrice, a reminder of a past forgiven, if not forgotten. And Poirot, his tisane awaiting him in London, felt the satisfaction of a mystery solved. The truth brought to light by the relentless work of his little grey cells.